Let's talk more about your book, Cigarette Girl. What's the inspiration? How did that come to you? Did it come to you, or was it something that you had to dig in?
Yes,
Because it can be quite daunting to publish a book.
Yeah, because you put a piece of yourself out there, and you don't know the quality, especially if you are a beginner writer. How do you know that people will like it? If I want to say something that is so me, the book is the ideal part of me as a writer.
Welcome to Shelf Therapy, the podcast where literature meets inspiration. We are passionate about bringing the magic of books to the young readers, especially in Indonesia. In each episode, we dive into conversations about books and how it can profoundly impact your lives, and in hopes can help you navigate yours. We would really appreciate your support by subscribing to this channel. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below, and please leave us your feedback so that we can grow together. This season, we are shooting at the comfort of Bumi Kinar's library in Ubud, so I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude for them for lending us their beautiful space. I hope that you enjoy the podcast. Today we have Ratih Kumala. Ratih Kumala is an Indonesian writer who since 2003 has published 8 fictions, including novels and collections of short stories. Her novel, Gadis Kretek, has been published in 6 languages and adapted into a limited series on Netflix. Ratih is also a screenwriter for films, television dramas, and various digital media. Her latest book is Saga, dari Samudra, a novel published in 2023. Hi, Mbak Ratih. Thank you so much for joining us today at Shelf Therapy. How are you?
I'm good. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We love having you. We were so excited to have you here because, of course, Gadis Kretek was so incredible to watch. I can't wait to eventually finish the book. Yeah, I'm so happy to be able to discuss with you a little bit about your life and your relationship with literature and writing and books.
Yes.
So without a further ado, I would like to ask you maybe first your relationship with reading and writing as a kid.
Okay. I think I fall in love with writing since I was reading since I was teenager. And at that time, I read Indonesian teenage book such as Lupus by Hilman, and then also Enid Blyton, of course. And then I also some of translated book from English into Indonesia, like Girls Talk, something like that. During my high school, I think I lost interest with books, but then I went back again, fall in love with reading in my college era. At the same time, that was like in 2000s. I'm sure have you born yet?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, actually, yes. 96.
So in early 2000, I also start to write. I fall in love with writing, not just reading, but writing. So I start to write. I even have like a small community around my my university that they sometimes once a week we gather together, discussing one title of book and then just talk about things about writing and reading.
Right. Communities are important. I was talking to a writer about communities on how it sort of gives you confidence to be able to write and publish it, actually, because it can be quite daunting to publish a book to share with the world.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you put a piece of yourself out there.
Yes.
And you don't know the quality, especially if you are a beginner writer.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that people will like it?
But
or even
writers,
criticize it, right?
But some writers also just release the expectation of the outcome or the result or the feedback that they would get from other people, because some of them are not writing for the audience or people, they're writing for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, I can understand that, because I think every piece of writing, they have their own audience, whether it is a large audience or whether it is just for you or maybe for your close friends.
Right.
I think every book, every writing material has their own audience, and they will find it.
And how did you gain the interest for reading? Was it an influence from your parents? Was it your friends or school? I'm just curious to see, because I know a lot of Indonesians, even people my age, you know, they tell me directly, I don't like to read.
Yeah.
I've never read a book even. One of my close friends, she has not read a book all her life until a year or 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, oh yeah, thanks to you and book talk, I wanted to read these series and I just started reading, and she reads like a book a week now. So I'm just curious to see, like, kind of when you were younger, where did you find that influence or desire?
I think it's from my cousin. Yeah, my cousin, she loves reading teenage books. So that's why I got that influence from her. And then I explore more around it. And then my father, he also support me. He bought me magazines every week. He always comes home with magazines like Bobo, Gadis, and then what else? Those teenagers, Hi, and then Kawanku. I don't know, maybe have you ever heard about
For
those?
sure.
Yeah.
I know
it's
Bobo,
not there
Gadis
anymore.
In fact, I was talking about magazines earlier, and whenever I used to travel to Australia, to Melbourne, I used to get so excited to go to the supermarket because they sell this magazine that I used to love and was obsessed with, called Dolly magazine.
Oh.
That's like the Australian version of Gadis.
I see. Yeah. I love Gadis so much. And my cousin, she has so many editions of Gadis, like a whole rack of Gadis. And every time I went to her place, I always, I want to read this magazine. Just put it back because it's this edition, just don't ruin it, something like that. She loves reading so much, and that influenced me.
Yeah. But I think there could be a stronger influence for reading coming from schools. For instance, I feel so blessed that I was able to go to an international school where I had to study English literature, study Shakespeare, George Orwell, Treasure Island. I forgot the writer. Those sorts of books, you know, the classics. But in Indonesia, we don't have that, or at least I didn't. In SD, in primary school, kita nggak ada subjek Indonesian literature atau sastra Indonesia.
Iya, memang nggak ada. Bahasa Indonesia mengajarkan tentang menulis bahasa Indonesia dengan baik dan benar, like grammar, you know.
In fact, the most famous Indonesian fictional character is probably Budi.
Exactly, because Ini Ibu Budi, right? Budi. That's like the first book all Indonesian read in the beginning of their school year. Ini Ibu Budi.
Yeah, which is so interesting. And I think a lot of people ask me, oh, gimana caranya untuk memajukan literasi di Indonesia? It's simple, you know, but the simple things are always harder to do, to realize. And it's like adding it to the school programs, you know, like making kids read and analyze books and make them understand that there's more to reading than just like for fun or a chore.
Yes.
So
exactly.
That's really interesting. So how about writing? How did you come across that?
When I was in college, remember I told you earlier that I have a community. In the beginning, it was just like community to read. But when you read something too much, when you read books too much, the effect is you want you also want to say something. That's actually what happened to me. I want to say something.
Right.
And I thought like I can do writing, perhaps not novel in the beginning. I started writing short stories actually. And I sent so many short stories in Kompas, Koran Kompas.
Right.
And I got so many rejection letters from them.
Oh no.
Seriously, like
they must be regretting it now.
Actually, that's part of process.
It is.
I think my mom still keeps some of the rejection letter back home in
Maybe you could
Solo.
compile it. Oh, compile the short stories from Kompas.
I do. I know.
Oh,
no, I have.
Okay.
I have I have short stories book. I think after I tried for 4 years or 5 years for my short stories to be published in Kompas, I finally got it.
I see.
Yeah, it was in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. That was like the first short stories I have published in Kompas, and I was so proud of it.
Yes.
And I was so proud of it because it's not easy.
No.
Yeah, I tried I tried to write for different newspapers because I think, well, I do. They publish my short stories and I'm happy. But to go to Kompas for me at that time, oh my God, it's so hard. This is like one challenging, stepping stone that I have to go through, something like that.
Literally everyone has to deal with rejection.
Yeah.
Even like those people who seem like they're on top of the world.
Yeah.
But how did you feel? Like what were you thinking when, your work got rejected? I just want to maybe share your experience so that it could also encourage a young Indonesian writer.
Yeah. For me, I think the situation between me when I was started as a writer compared to young writers right now is very different. We didn't have choice back there except to send our work to newspapers or to magazines. And we have so many competitors. Not only me. I wasn't the only writer who wants to be published in newspapers or magazines, and they have very limited space, right? I thought at that time maybe I set my bar too high. So that's why then I try to send my short stories to other newspaper, to local newspaper. And then maybe I have to take like one step at a time. And it is proven that in the next 5 years, in 2006, my short story was actually first published for Kompas. But I think for the kids right now, the beginner writer, it's easier for them.
Right.
Yeah, because we have a blog, and then we also have like application for writing, online application for writing, and everyone can put their work there without any filter from editor,
right?
Without any limitation,
including myself. I started writing a little blog
because this is your time.
But it's more for like a journal for me.
Yeah,
it feels like my life is going at a very fast pace that I need to sit down, reflect on all the events that I go to, all the things that I do on my daily life. So for me, it's just like a therapy, a form of therapy, to put out my experience that day and to cherish it.
Yeah, I wish I have that kind of media.
You're welcome to contribute. I'm asking people to contribute, the more the merrier.
Yeah, I wish I have that kind of media back then when I started as writer.
Right.
All I have was just like a diary and no one can read it. But now it changes,
that's such a valuable lesson though, because you learn that there's not only one way. You learn that not to give up just because you're being rejected. You keep going, and you kept being so consistent. I was gonna ask you next, how were you able to be that consistent for so long?
I was actually questioning myself the same thing.
Is it the support? Is it the community? Or is it like your passion for writing? Or you just had so many things you want to put out there?
I think after a few years of writing, I come to realize that I want to be a writer. I actually told my mom that I want to be a writer. I used to have a fixed job, and I was working as a public relations officer. Yeah, in a company.
That, for me, public relation is quite a glamorous job.
I know, right? Well, but then at that time, I thought this is not what I want to do. So I think less than a year, I decided to resign. And I told my mom that I want to be a writer. And at that time, my mom asked me, "You mean you want to be a journalist?" Because for her, it's not common, to be a writer.
Yeah.
Like a writer.
Because back then, how do you make ends meet becoming a writer?
Yeah, exactly.
Even today, it's so hard.
Exactly. I mean, journalist is also part of a writer, part of writer. But I want to write books.
You should have told her novelist. Novelist.
I want to write books. And so my mom, she allowed me to resign. And I thought after I finish this one book, then if it's not meant to be for me to be a writer, it's okay. I will, find another job. Maybe I wasn't meant to be a writer at that time. But then I submit my first novel in Jakarta Art Council, Dewan Kesenian Jakarta. They have like a writing competition regularly. And I won the competition. And at that time, that's when I realized that, I think I know what I want.
Yeah.
I think I know what I want.
Wow, I see you as a very also persistent person, which is an amazing quality to have.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Because you could have given up easily, like after being rejected for your first short story.
Yeah.
So,
well, I try to because, and you know what? Actually, I published my first novel first, and then 2 years later, I just got my first short story published in Kompas. So it's that hard.
Yeah. And maybe also because you worked in public relation, you could also see how sometimes having more credibility to your name can change people's perspective of your work.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is insane sometimes because, I mean, even with food, sometimes you have to blind test things to really taste the real flavor of things because we get, even looks, credibility, everything kind of can impact someone's opinion.
Yeah.
Which is insane, but that's just how the world works.
Yes.
Anyway, to contrast all that, how did you feel knowing that your book, Gadis Kretek, was going to be made into a Netflix series and eventually becoming like one of the most successful Netflix series in Indonesia?
I actually never targeted my book to be adapted as a movie or a series because I'm also a scriptwriter, right? I'm also a scriptwriter. I become a scriptwriter since 2007 and I know the industry. Sometimes some producer asks me to adapt someone else's book into a script, into a movie.
Yeah.
And I usually reject them because I'm also a novelist.
Right.
And I know how it feels when someone who is not you think that they deserve, to rewrite the whole story. It's going to be their version and it's going to be maybe they will puzzling all the plot and everything. I know how it feels, so I always reject that. But when it comes to Cigarette Girl, because this is my own book, I was willing to do it. At that time, I thought I should be the one who, dengan tanda kutip, ruin the book. You know, if I want someone to ruin the book, it's going to be me, not someone else's, right?
Yes.
So I know all the
it's
changes.
Your work.
Yeah. I know why a decision in the production is made. I know all the technical difficulties. I can recognize the final product as that's also mine. I don't want to regret in the last step when they just previewing the series to me and I said I don't like it. I don't want to be that person.
Right.
So that's why I was willingly to involve myself as a scriptwriter.
Okay, so you were actually really involved. What about the I was particularly, taken away with the costume and the fashion.
Of course,
were you involved in
course.
That too?
It's your field.
Yeah.
Right?
But were you also involved in that?
For the costume, actually no. Because when I wrote A Cigarette Girl, I didn't even think about Jengyah costume. I mean, on the book, the one that's not this cover, the previous cover, Jengyah is wearing like a green kebaya. In my head, when I wrote this character, yes, she is wearing kebaya. But then when we develop it into a series, when we develop the whole stories, and then we hand it out to different departments, including the costume department and then the makeup department, they will have their own interpretation of that character. And I couldn't say no because I think they know better about it compared to me. Because they see Jengyah in the script with the particular packaging. And I think he did a great job. His name is Hagai Pakan. Maybe you've heard his name, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I was so lucky because I was working with talented artists for Cigarette Girl. At the same time, I have to give room for them.
Yes. Find the balance.
Yeah.
You're right.
I mean, I don't want to be a control freak who say that, oh, Jengyah is not going to wear a black kebaya and everything. But because people has their own interpretation, I wrote the script and then I hand it out. Like, they're also my reader and they have their own interpretation for Jengyah, and then they realizing it as the character.
Right.
And I appreciate that because I think it's enriched the character itself.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure everyone has their own imagination of the characters. And I'm sure you've also, I'm not sure, but you might have read even like some people's feedback on, well, no, the character should have been like this and that.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, what were your biggest challenges in Gadis, Kretek, Cigarette Girl, being a scriptwriter after, publishing the novel and then working on the series?
As a novelist, think like I'm the mother of this book.
Okay.
Right. And when someone else suddenly work on this book as well, and I can tell that they're so into it, they put a lot of love to it, I realize that the sense of belonging to the book is not just mine now.
I see.
I have to like give some room for them. They also have the same sense of belonging to the book as me because they're also part of the creator for Cigarette Girl, the series. I have to share that room right now.
Yeah.
I'm kind of sad actually.
Oh, all right. It's okay. It's okay.
But for me, it's a good sad. It's a good sad.
Yeah. It's your baby.
It's my baby. Now they have lots of uncles and aunties, right?
Yes, absolutely. But even if the novel is not made into a film, you're also sharing it with people.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
it's more in their imagination.
Yeah, exactly. They will have their own, imagination about who's going to be Jengyah. Even until today, even when I think Dian Sastrowardoyo did a great job as a as Jengya. But you know, sometimes people, why do you pick her? Why not this actors or that actors?
Yes.
People always have opinions, you know?
Regardless if it's a film or anything, people always do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's just the way it is. But has your relationship with writing your novel after that changed? Or not relationship, I guess process or way of thinking in terms of working on your next book change after Cigarette Girl, after the success, and also the you working on the series itself?
Since I'm also working as a scriptwriter, I always have like the firm separation between these two.
Right.
If I want
to
write,
divide yourself.
Yeah, I divide myself. Exactly. I divide myself. It wasn't easy actually. If I want to say something that is so me, so Ratih Kumala, then it's going to be a book.
Okay.
Like the book is the ideal part of me as a writer. But if I want to go to the industrial, it's going to be script writer.
I see. I can resonate with that.
I always divide that into two.
Yeah.
So every time I write a book, I'm going to wear a hat as a novelist. And then if I write a script, I'm going to wear a hat as a script writer. It's not easy because during the process of me writing the novel Cigarette Girl, it was also the time when I started to write script. I learned to write script at that time.
Okay.
And I had like a terrible writer's block.
Oh.
Yeah, for a year.
For the script?
For the book, actually.
Oh, for the book.
For the book.
Right.
Because at that time, I just realized that it's two different field of writing. And the whole me trying to be a good script writer actually ruined me, the novelist.
Right.
Yeah.
Your brain is kind of confused.
Yes. And so I decided to stop writing any books for a year.
Yeah.
Writing and reading, actually.
Yeah.
Also reading. I have to give myself distance. I remember I tried to continue Cigarette Girl, but I can't. The result was so bad. So I know that, okay, I have to stop this. And then a year later.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah. A year later, I was like, okay, maybe now I know how to do it. Now I know how to split my head, something like that.
Right. Sometimes it takes me a year to think as well.
See? So it makes sense, right? A year.
Sometimes I'm like, why didn't I think about this earlier? Okay, why did it just come now?
Exactly.
But sometimes, timing is there for you.
Yeah.
There's always a reason behind everything. I really believe that.
Yeah.
But so actually I was talking to Hanako Footman, who is an actor, and she wrote her first novel. And she said that, it took her 3 years to write the novel, while writing a script for her took 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Is it similar for you?
It's kind of similar.
What's the difference in process between script writing and noveling?
So for me, writing a book is something that I have to enjoy. So I take as many time as I need to finish it. And it really is take years for me to finish a book, because this book, Cigarette Girl, I finished it for over 3 years, maybe almost 4 years, including the part when I got a writer's block. That's including that part. And meanwhile, for script, it's because I work with a lot of people.
I was going to ask about that too.
Right? And the final product is actually audiovisual, whether it's movie or series or maybe Sinetron, soap opera, whatever that is.
Do you do that?
I do,
Okay.
because I used to work for national television company. And so for me, writing script is actually because so many people waiting for me, waiting for my script. I always have tight deadline.
Right.
And I don't want to apply that when I write a novel.
Yeah.
It has to be like something I really like.
Something sincere.
Something sincere.
Yeah, because with script, you have the added pressure.
Exactly.
So my next question is, what's your favorite Sinetron?
My favorite Sinetron is actually Sidul Anak Sekolahan.
Okay. I will look it up later. I see some people laughing as well. That's really interesting. Did you write that?
No. It was long before I was becoming a writer.
I see.
I think they premiere when I was in junior high school, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
But it's still my favorite Sinetron until right now because they often rerun it on television, and I think it still works.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually part of my dream. I want to produce a Sinetron or an FTV, whatever that is, that can be rerun as long as it could, and it's sepanjang masa,
okay,
and still relatable for the audience in the future.
Yeah. So, in regards to that, I wanted to ask you also, before we talk more about Gadis Kretek and your inspiration for the novel, I want to ask you, do you have any notable authors or books that inspired the way that you write or the process of your noveling?
So many, I think, because one of my favorite female author is, I like Ayu Utami from Indonesia.
She's a very bold character.
Yes. And I also like Jenar Maesa Ayu, who is also now a director and actor as well. And I like Dewi Lestari, D.
She's lovely.
Yes. I know, right? And I love Sapardi Djoko Pramono, the poet. And then Joko Pinurbo, the poet. I think the way I write in the beginning of my career, I tend to try to write like them, before I find my own.
Try to emulate.
Yeah, before I find my own style. Yeah. Well, for me, it's part of process. As long as I'm not doing plagiarism, it's fine. But then later on, you will find your own style. And that's when I come to realize sometimes beginner writer asking me how to find your own style as a writer. They don't. Like, the style will come to you. Yeah.
Comes with experience.
Yes.
Comes with, again, sincerity. And I feel like also being able to be very honest with yourself.
Exactly.
And to be able to sit in a dark room and just face all your fears.
Exactly.
Which is very important as a writer, I think, because when you have fear, especially fear of criticism or appearing to be something else to other people or people pleasing, you stop yourself.
Exactly. I agree. Definitely.
And also, I wanted to ask you about poetry, because you mentioned a couple of poets. Actually, before that, I was going to ask, what about Laksmi, the writer?
Laksmi Pamuncak.
Yeah, Laksmi Pamuncak, not me. Anyway, so again, speaking of poetry, because I also love poetry. I love Maya Angelou. And
Maya Angelou. My favorite is Robert Frost.
Robert Frost.
Yes.
How about Charles Bukowski?
It's okay, I think.
It's really deep.
Yeah, I like Robert Frost. I like Emily Dickinson. Those two.
Okay.
Yeah, but I fall in love with Indonesian poetry, especially from Pak Sapardi Djoko Damono and from Joko Pinurbo. And I was so lucky to know them while they were alive and healthy at that time. And I appreciate that very much.
I would like to go more into Indonesian poetry as well. Poems.
Yeah.
Because actually reading your book in Indonesian, I forgot how much I like to read in Indonesian. Actually.
Oh, really?
Yes, I do. Because I read Laksmi Pamuncak's book, Kekasih Musim Gugur, in Indonesian, and it's quite enjoyable. For some reason, it feels easier for me to read in Indonesian than in English sometimes. I don't know if it's because some of the English books that I read are quite heavy and complex.
Yeah.
Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Oh yeah, that's heavy and complex.
But I also read light books like The Alchemist and a lot of memoirs, autobiography, etc. But yeah, I really enjoy reading in Indonesian. But yeah, I wanted to know more about your love for poetry and how poetry influenced your work, or maybe even the importance of poetry.
Yeah.
Just anything you'd like to say about poetry.
So actually for me, why I admire poet so much is because I think when a novel is writing a novel, then a small ideas, it must be, they grow the ideas. See, from a very small seed, and then they grow the ideas like a, say as a, like a tree, something like that. But for a poet, you absorb everything, and then you squeeze all the essence into words, which that is the thing that's, I don't think I can do it.
I agree. I mean, not I agree that you can't do it, but I agree that poetry is very concentrated.
Yes.
Very meaning.
Exactly.
And essence.
Exactly.
And it's very powerful.
Yeah.
That's also why I like to read poetry. Sometimes the poem itself motivates you.
Yes.
Or just gives you hope and
you feel loved.
Feel loved.
Right.
Well, different poems, different feeling.
Different emotion, right?
Different emotion.
That's what so amazing about poetry, I think. With that short of words, you know, it can move people.
Yeah. And sometimes confusing too.
Yeah,
because
of course. So that's why I'm being picky with the poet.
Yeah. But even confusing makes sense in a way, because sometimes how we think is confusing.
Yes.
Life is also confusing.
Yeah.
So sometimes the poetry itself want to capture that, which is very interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I like Sapardi Djoko Damono, and then I like Joko Pinurbo, because they can squeeze the essence of whatever theme that they want to write for the poetry. They also put kind of comedy sometimes in the poetry.
I think Indonesians like to joke as
yes.
well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like they have like a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the poetry, and I think that's another challenge. That's another level of you being a poet.
That's like another layer to the poetry.
Exactly.
Which is incredible. Yeah. So how do you turn your inspiration from poetry into your own work, if that makes sense?
I tried to write poetry, but obviously I couldn't.
Yeah.
But for me, you know, reading poetry is like traveling, because I don't have to read heavy books, which probably takes hours or even days to finish. But when you read a poetry collection, it's just one poetry at a time. For me, that's like, it's so light, because I can finish, I have an achievement that I have finished one poetry just this hour. And then sometimes I let myself enjoy one poetry, and then I keep thinking about it over and over again. And maybe this poet talks about this, or maybe this poet talks about that. And that sort of become the inspiration for me to write. Maybe, think that particular poetry as the seed, and then I'm the novelist who will grow a tree, something like that.
I see. For me, poetry is just so important, because without it, I think we kind of lose the beauty of being human.
Yeah.
Because I think if we're not poetic, just something missing. You know? Like, where's the salt? Where's the sugar? Where's the poetry? Yeah. I feel like for me also, I can't be forced to write a poem. comes to me at the most random time. Like when I'm just sitting by the pool and then I look at the trees, and then because for me nature is poetry itself, I just write it down. I feel like I'm just the messenger. I'm not actually creating it myself out of nowhere. It's all around me, and I'm just, or even inside of me, my feelings, and I'm just like pouring it down on a piece of paper, or actually just my phone.
Do the word come to you, or you have to force it? Okay, I want to write something about trees, or
it comes to me. Like I remember I was just sitting by the pool, and then I saw a kite or kites, and then I just wrote some things about kites.
It comes to you.
Just comes to me.
That's what's amazing from the poet, you know.
Yes.
The words just come to you.
Yes.
It's very different with me being a novelist.
Yeah.
I have to find the word. I have to
but
find
I think
the word.
That process in itself is also very enjoyable if you like it.
Yeah, of course.
Seru banget kayak.
Seru banget, ya memang.
Creating something out of nothing, I can also resonate with that.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about your book, Cigarette Girl. What's the inspiration? How did that come to you? Did it come to you, or was it something that you had to dig in deep?
So actually, my late grandfather, he passed away a long time ago.
Okay.
I never knew him, but he was a clove cigarette businessman.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, in Java, in teeny tiny city in Java, which is Kota M.
Yeah, I think everyone knows that.
Yeah, and
but we don't. Where is it?
Should I tell you or not?
Should we tell the world?
Should we tell the world? Yeah. Well, I didn't know him, but the story about him remains because every year the big family gather in my grandfather's house, and then my mom, my uncles, and my aunties, they talk about how the house was used for a factory. So every day this worker came to the house, and then the ladies, they roll the cigarette by hand. And then I remember my uncle told me that my grandfather actually keep the pile of tobacco around the house. So the house is always smells like tobacco. And I think it's interesting. And I get that story over and over again since I was little, since I was a kid. And then when I become a writer, I remember that story again. I thought at that time, I want to write something about clove cigarette. I want to know more about my late grandfather. What can I do about it? So I created a story. Of course, the story is fictional. Cigarette Girl is fictional. But the background about the cigarette industry, about the history, that's all true. The problem is I don't know anything about cigarette except that story.
Right.
So I have to do some research. I have to do some research. The way I did it is because I have a fixed job at that time. I was telling you earlier that I work for a national television company.
Yes.
And I also didn't have much money to do the whole research for at one time. So I have to, I have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
And usually every month for several months, every time I just got my salary, I will take one day off, whether that's on Friday or on Monday. And I usually use that day plus the weekend to go for research. And I go to Kudus, I go to Cirebon, and then to Magelang, Kedu, Semarang. And it takes like several months for me to finish everything. I have to make sure whom I want to meet and where I want to go and what I want to observe during the research, because I don't want to waste my hard-earned money at that time.
Yeah.
And then I will go back home and then write the story again, continue writing the story. The process is always like that. I'm the kind of writer, sometimes a writer, they do the research, the whole research in the beginning. I'm not that kind of writer. I'm the kind of writer that I know what I want to write, and I want to write this part first. I don't have to write everything from the first chapter. I can start from any chapter, actually.
Right.
And then I found out that I need more research for that particular chapter, then I do the research. It's like that. My process is like that.
But it's also like a personal rediscovery of your past and your heritage, which is very interesting to me. And while you were talking about your inspiration, I had in mind that we all have sort of a treasure box of ideas, and it's just up to us to open it and to turn it into something.
Yeah.
Which is really fascinating.
Yeah.
So I think we've spoken a lot about books and Cigarette Girl today, but I also want to know maybe your favorite books personally, and or a book that you go to whenever you want to go deep within yourself, or to understand yourself, or just to feel, to learn about something, I guess. Anything. The books that you love and enjoy reading.
Okay. I really like this Japanese writer, but I don't think he writes more. He's not that popular, actually. His name is Hikaru Okuizumi, and his book is The Stone Cry Out. I really like that book. And then I like all Sapardi Djoko Damono's book, especially Hujan Bulan Juni. And then I also like Joko Pinurbo's book. There are some poetry collection that he wrote that I really like, which is Kepada Cium. And then I also like something that is really light, I think. It's Edgar Karet book. The title is 7 Good Years. It's actually a light essay book. And for me, reading that, it's very relatable to me because the way he wrote it is very light, and I think many people can feel relatable with the essay that he wrote. Yeah.
So I know that you write to sort of tell your stories and put your voice out there because you said you were reading a lot earlier. But what do you read for? Do you really read for enjoyment, or just passing time, or enriching yourself? Because I really want people to also understand and know that reading can really open horizons, open doors for you. And whatever is the reason, books are important. So I would like to know why you think reading or books are important, and what do you read for?
Okay. Lately, I'm very picky with the book. You know, the thing about you know more about books and you read too much books, sometimes you understand the mentality or the emotion of the author when you read that particular book, right? But lately, I've been revisiting Harimau Harimau by Mohtar Lubis. It is an old book. I think it's first published in whether that's late 70s and early 80s, I think. And I reread that because I was so upset with the whole political situation.
Okay. We're going there.
Okay. No. Just okay, that, okay? No. That's the information. But yeah,
we only cry in this podcast. We don't want to get angry.
Okay. That's great.
Crying is allowed, but let's not ruin our moods.
Okay. But I think, reading in general, it's not only about you having more knowledge, but also you being a human, especially if it is a fiction book. Sometimes people think that fictions are not important, but I think fiction is very important.
I agree.
Because it's part of you being a human.
Yes, and I love fiction books that have so many metaphors for what's actually happening in the real world.
I know, right?
Yes. I love how writers cleverly write fictions, although in fact it's what's happening around them or in the world, packaged in a fairy tale or fantasy.
Yeah.
I think it's just
it's so smart, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's so smart.
Yeah, I just want to put out there one of my favorite short stories, The Garden of Time, J.G. Ballard.
What's the first book that you read?
The first book that I read.
Do you remember?
I don't think I
not
remember.
Your parent reading it for you, but okay.
The first
I want to read this book.
The first book that I had to read independently was actually for my les bahasa Inggris.
Okay.
Even though, I had a teacher there sitting down with me to dissect the book and understand it word by word in a way, even though I already spoke English. But I feel like that was my first book that I had to read for myself. And it was Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes. I was just talking about this, and that book is quite profound and quite important for me because more than just reading my first book, it really touches my human side as well, because what happened to Sadako, who was the main character, who was actually the similar age to me at the time when I was reading it. Sadako and I kind of was in a similar age, and to learn about the unfortunate circumstances of her life and her actually facing death was quite eye-opening, because I was just a kid. I was just, playing in the rice fields or going to school and having quite a fortunate and privileged life. So knowing that someone else out there is not sharing my life experience and how lucky I was quite sad. So it taught me to be grateful for what I have and just appreciate life. So I think I would say that might have been my kind of first book that I read for myself. Okay. Before that, my mom read a lot to me, and I still love those books, like Where the Wild Things Are. Narnia. I love Narnia. So many. Or it might have also could be after Sadako, but I read like Pippi Longstockings.
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah?
My kid actually loved that book so much.
Yeah. What else did I read? Can't remember. Anyway, I think we need to wrap up now, but I still want to ask you my final question, which is maybe not what you're working on next, or if you want to include what you're working on next, but I also want you to share a little bit about Saga dari Samudra.
Okay, so Saga dari Samudra, it's first published last year. In Indonesia, especially in Islamic community, there's 9 saints. We call it 9 wali. And for me, the story of 9 wali it amazed me since I was very little, because these saints, they have fantasy story which is so amazing, and I amazed by them. And in 2013, actually, I got a chance to go to their makam, their tomb. There are 9 makam at that time in Central Java. Oh, the whole Java, the West Java, the Central Java, and then also East Java. I went to the whole makam and I get to know them better. And one of those wali called Sunan Giri. Sunan Giri, when he was born, the grandfather, the king of Blambangan is Banyuwangi at that time. They didn't want him, so the mother must throw the baby out to the sea.
Okay.
And then the baby then found by a very rich lady. Her name is Nyai Ageng Pinate. And then she raised the baby, named the baby Jaka Samudra. Samudra is sea, because he was found in the sea. and he will grow up become one of those wali Sunan Giri.
Is this a retelling of a
Yes.
famous Indonesian folklore?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a retelling because I amazed by that. So I thought I want to write something that's, I feel like I'm amazed by the whole story, but I also recreate it and I also packaging it as a cerita laga, cerita silat. Because in Indonesia, the whole cerita silat is written by men.
Wow.
So I was wondering at that time, what if there's a woman writing cerita silat?
Right.
And I was developing the story, and then I just like, oh, maybe I should write this, packaging it as cerita silat. So that's how it becomes.
And I love
Saga
how
dari Samudra.
And I love also how you repackage Indonesian traditions and heritage into modern Indonesia.
Yeah.
If you can say so.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was such a great conversation. I think I need 2 more hours to talk about Saga dari Samudra with you. Unfortunately, we don't have that today. But I'm so thankful that we got to chat today. It was so lovely.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, we're grateful to have you because, we need more writers like you here in Indonesia who's putting Indonesian literature forward. So especially women writers.
Yes.